going to talk about Fire Rescue VR, which is a project we did together, the Pleiadian Systems and PreviewLabs. It's about developing a minimum viable product for firefighting in VR. So this is a work in progress. So I'll pass the mic to Fred.
Thanks so much, Bernard. I wish I could see you all, but obviously I'm piping in remotely here. So just to introduce myself, I'm Fred Caserta. I'm founder, president, CEO of Pleiadian Systems. We've got an exciting presentation for you today. My background is graphic design, advertising, and marketing. That was my career for 30 years. And then in 2016, I started tinkering around with 360 spherical videos and virtual reality for some of my advertising and personal interests.
So tell me when I need to advance to the next slide.
Okay. Like I touched on, my background in design, I happened to get a call by a former creative director and brought me on board at ASC Games, where I was assigned the role of lead graphic designer and art director for packaging, branding, marketing, and promotion of the first US release of Grand Theft Auto GTA, the video game, back in 1998. And then from there, I went on to Rockstar Games, and I worked on some additional titles there at ASC. So that was my first real introduction in terms of the industry. But certainly, just like most of you, the video game generation from Atari to the C64, Amiga, and then into Apple systems for my career in design and art direction, kind of teed up me for what I needed to really be focusing on for this last 6 years. So I think there may be a couple of slides in here kind of with some videos in that. So after ASC, if you fast forward to 2001, I was hired as creative director for Motorola's Integrated Solutions Division. And my goal was to focus on marketing the computer and hardware systems for public safety, law enforcement, and homeland security following 9/11. If I remember, it was 5 years of 60-hour plus work weeks. So that was a grueling grind, but it prepared me. So some basic product launch videos I directed and produced for consumer brands such as Armor All, STP, BIC, and others. So I was, in this particular project, I was very fortunate to work with the king of NASCAR, Richard Petty himself, and the folks at STP. And so we're flying drones and shooting and doing all kinds of great stuff. So I directed and produced this piece, and kind of reignited my interest in auto sports, and that's where kind of segue into some of the 360 spherical video footage that you'll see. This is one of my favorite shot right there, a silhouette of the king. And so my career provided me with a lot of the tools that I needed to start to focus on my own endeavor, to create my own system, my own software package, and working with PreviewLabs. So actually, if you go back one, so this is where I started playing around with 360 spherical videos. This had never been done before, nor will it ever be reproduced with the driver of this car. This is a 4-time Indy 500 winner, Alan Unser Sr., as he takes his car out for the SVRA, Sports Vintage Racing Association, at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So in this video clip, I'm dragging the video around so you can imagine if you had a VR headset on, it would give you a sense as to being in the car as close to reality as we could make it. And then carrying over to the virtual reality part for some of my clients at the time, like Armor All and STP, creating an interactive virtual space, boutique space for brands. So this was actually October, November of 2016. So it was pretty early in the game, and we had interactive, it was actually a passive experience. So you could look around using an inexpensive, Google Cardboard or a Samsung S7 Edge or that type of thing. And these were all YouTube videos. So from there, after having some success with those projects, I had the idea of using virtual reality for a higher purpose, which was really to immerse our first responders into, potentially hazardous situations to better educate them, train them, assess, and evaluate, and with the ultimate goal of saving lives and reducing injury to not only themselves but to the public that they serve. So that's been my focus since December of 2016. I have not stopped. It has been a grueling process, but I would not trade it for anything. And so once we got some contacts out in the video game industry, some of the big players, we contracted with Phosphor Studios. They were known for, I'm trying to think now, they had a pretty big video game title for Sony PlayStation VR when they launched, and it's escaping me now. But so, we worked with them and we built the first iteration using Unreal Engine, and took it around the country for a year and got plenty of validation, probably more validation than they actually needed. But the firefighters were really taken back with what it was that we were focusing on, which was using video game technology for the betterment of their profession. And so we moved along from there. We were introduced to Bernard and the team at PreviewLabs a couple of years ago. This is my internal team. Mike Callan, National Fire Hazmat expert, has been training fire and hazmat teams for 50 years. And Christina Agvant, she's got a degree, she's got a doctorate in higher education, curriculum development. So the three of us, coupled with the folks at PreviewLabs, we're about to unveil something we're pretty excited about. And this will be an ongoing process, as you can imagine. Like, I always liken it to Microsoft Flight Simulator. And in the first iteration, 1982, everything looked like origami, green field, triangles and rectangles and gray boxes and things like that. So, and where they are today in their development. So I'm excited to jump in. And Bernard, if you want to take it back from there.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm Bernard Francois. I'm the founder of PreviewLabs. I run this company. It does rapid prototyping of game technology. It started back in 2010. First, a very short introduction. After I graduated in 2007, I first worked briefly at a game publisher, without really thinking about it. We worked on a serious game there, I believe, which is like one where you practice test questions for a theoretical driving exam on the Nintendo DS. So that was a company where they would take games from other territories and translate it to Dutch. I'm from Belgium. So basically, we took this game from a French publisher and kind of ported it. Of course, I studied industrial engineering and computer science, and this wasn't too challenging for me, so I moved on to a different company. Where I worked for 2 years, which did games for Nintendo Wii and Nintendo DS. One of them was actually called My Pet Practice Marine Patrol, where we had like a infinite water surface where you could go on with a Zodiac and kind of jump over the waves. And so we did some wave simulation. It was kind of not really simulation, as it was just a sum of sine waves of different frequencies and phase shifts and amplitudes. And but with some trickery, we found the minimum amount of sine waves that we could add up to run on a device, a Nintendo Wii, which was slower than I think that one of the first iPhones. So it was very limited in memory. It had 64 megabytes of RAM. I think that was not even on the first version of the device of the Wii. Anyway, working on these games, we did basically projects of 6 to 9 months, and I really noticed that I liked the beginning of the project a lot more. Basically, you figure out these technical challenges. For example, the water surface thing. It's like, yeah, that was an interesting technical challenge. And then also, how is that going to be fun in terms of gameplay? Like the steering of the boat was kind of an interesting thing to do. And then after that, so that's like the first 2 months of out of 9 months of the project, and then the rest is just implementing things. You know what you have to build. You just have to do it. And then at the end, it's fixing bugs. Sometimes bugs, like you're in a certain pause menu and you eject the disk, and then like maybe one in, even if you're lucky, one player will actually encounter that bug, and then so basically the impact you have on the game is not very big in the middle and the end of the development. Of course, you have to build it properly, and there's definitely a lot of skill to that. But I was really more interested in the beginning. That I actually noticed really when I went to the first edition of the Global Game Jam in 2009, where you make a game in 48 hours. So I just said, okay, this is super exciting. I would like to do this. And that's how I came up with the idea to start my company, PreviewLabs. So basically we do prototyping with game technology, like it's like game jamming, but for clients and paid. So this is a reel with a few recent examples. This one we did with the University of Michigan. This is Investidates, which had a different name. We kind of iterated on the name. It was first called One Night Stand. So that's a game that actually where we won an award this time. So we won one of the gold awards at this edition of Serious Play. That one. This is this is one for kids to learn reading, to help them with their reading skills. So yeah, that's just part of our work. Like we do games for serious games basically, as well as prototyping for entertainment games. A lot of clients and early stage startups, as well as in academia, and also larger corporations that are big enough to have this internal kind of startup thing going on, where you have small teams competing against each other. So that's where we excel. So yeah, having started in 2010 and 2022, this is our team. Like we're a team of 9 at the moment. So 8 gentlemen in the picture, plus some freelancers as well. So we have a team in Belgium as well as in the States. So in 2016, I moved to Connecticut to set up the US branch of the company. So now Fred came in the picture 2 years ago. We were introduced through common acquaintance. It was really exciting to hear about the project he was working on, because one of the things he wanted to do is, well, he had this fire related prototype where you could walk around in a burning house, but what he really wanted to do is make the fire like a simulation, so it would actually burn and kind of realistically with the actual progression of the fire, where fire could start at different areas in the house. So that was pretty challenging, given that he wanted to do that on an Oculus Quest, which is not the highest performing device compared to a state-of-the-art gaming computer. So just to show a bit like about my excitement for physics. So we over the years we've done a number of physics related prototypes, though not really at this level of I think chemistry simulation. If you think about, of course, you have physics and chemistry. I mean, in the end, it's kind of all physics. It ends up to be on a molecular level in chemistry, but basically, yeah, adding the chemistry in the mix and doing like kind of gas or liquid simulation, if you will. That was definitely really exciting to hear, to have the opportunity to work on that. To give an overview of the project, it basically has 2 components that we named. So there's Fire Rescue VR, which was originally the house where you can walk around and follow a few steps. It was a pretty linear experience. That was something Fred had developed earlier. So we wanted to convert that into a system with various training scenarios. So you can select a scenario, basically train for different things. And then there's also the system specifically for the fire and smoke simulation, which we call the Fred named Smoke. I believe it's an acronym. I'm not sure if you still, what does it stand for actually?
Oh yeah, I'd have to dig through my notes. It's been a while.
Sometimes it's more about the word in the end, but there is an acronym behind it. It appears to be a well-kept secret. So basically, there's what we needed to do in order to start with the Hofsmoke system was a technical feasibility study. And well, I'll tell you why. If you start prototyping, you can't always start right away on just prototyping. Like it's not like, oh, I have an idea. Okay, let's immediately jump into developing a prototype. Even though you think, yeah, prototyping is the first step, but sometimes there's a step before it. So in general, outside of this project even. So if the gameplay or the user experience isn't very clear, it's important to first do some brainstorming. So we do that by holding a requirement session and a brainstorm session with our clients. So we figure out, okay, what what are their goals? What do you want to achieve? And then from there, we brainstorm and come up with different ways to achieve that. Even if people thought of a certain way of achieving their goals, like it's always good to kind of have that conversation to see, have you considered other ways, or is it just one arbitrary chosen way? So if you apply a bit of a methodology to this, you can really discover more ideas and then go for the idea that seems to be having the highest potential. In this case, the idea was pretty clear, so in this project was not needed. Then there's also sometimes a technical reason why you cannot start prototyping right away. That's if the technical feasibility is not obvious. It's not obvious whether we would be able to run a real-time fire and smoke simulation to simulate fires and smoke in the whole house running on an Oculus Quest. So that was far from clear. And also, in some cases, maybe it's obvious that it's possible, but there's different technologies that can do it. And then it's important to kind of consider the different options and kind of compare them in a somewhat objective way. Like then you determine a few parameters based on which you want to compare these technologies, and then you kind of go over them one by one. You don't have to actually develop the whole prototype. You're doing some small testing to see what the actual measured performance is across different technologies. That can be really good. So yeah, in this case, we needed to do this. So that's what in that case, we do a technical feasibility study. So basically, in this case, we reviewed various solutions and algorithms for fire and smoke simulation. And we looked at certain criteria, including the execution speed and licensing cost of the solution. Of course, also hardware requirements. Some solutions would need an NVIDIA GPU, for example, to run. And then, then you're kind of out of options if you're using a VR headset. We looked in a few different solutions, like there was NVIDIA Flow and NVIDIA Flex. There's AmberGen, Fluid Ninja. So some of these are not even for real-time simulation, or they require a PC, or they require CUDA, or sometimes they simulate the fire in advance, and then they create an animation of the fire, and then you can use it in your game. In this case, we needed to, of course, interact with the fire in real time, like bring out a hose and spray water on the fire, and then maybe have steam that can be dangerous, really hot steam coming out of that. So yeah, that was really important. We also looked at algorithms that we could find that were documented that could do it. In the end, we ended up coming up with a bit of our own solution, of course, inspired and well, based on the actual physics and chemistry processes going on. So we reviewed a lot of different papers and looked at what are the options, and there's a lot of solutions that are either really complicated to implement and would be very unlikely to work on a VR device or in real time or at a decent scale. So that's why we ended up coming up with our own solution. So then after the feasibility study for the health smoke system, we did prototyping for both fire rescue, which is for the training scenarios, and the health smoke, which is the fire and the smoke simulation system. So here I'm going to show a bunch of different videos. But first, I want to add that, like, if you're iterating on the prototype, prototyping is really all about reducing the scope. Like, you think and envision the solution, and then you have to narrow it down to a more limited set of features. So the actual decisions of what you're going to implement in the prototype is really crucial. Usually we strive to have a good general overview in the first iteration, but it really depends on the prototype. In this case, for health smoke, we went with a more simplified approach in the beginning. For the fire rescue part, we did all the features, but in a very rudimentary level. We can learn about the different components and what would be needed to be explored further. So that's in the first iteration, and in later iterations to try out additional things. So I'm going to make that really instantly visual. So this is fire rescue first iteration prototype. So you have a briefing room where everybody can enter. So this is controlled by an instructor. So there's an instructor view, PC application, and then up to 4 people with a VR headset can join. So from the PC, you can view everybody that's in the VR space. You can do a little mission. In this case, go extinguish a fire with a fire extinguisher. That was a simplified scenario. We didn't need to bring in a hose or anything. It was just to show that we work, even though I doubt real firefighters would come to the scene with just a household item like a fire extinguisher. But yeah, this was our first test run that we did with the team. So it's me and our project manager, and then everybody in the team on Fred's side, with Christina and Mike. So yeah, that was a pretty exciting moment to get it to work for the first time. Meanwhile, we started to work on the health smoke system. In order to gain better insight, we also did some testing even before the prototype. We did some small tests to see what the fire and smoke would look like or should look like. So that's the idea, like the room is on fire, and then you see how the fire limits the visibility. That's of course a really important aspect in firefighting training, that the visibility is severely limited. So then the health smoke system, this was the first iteration where we basically have an environment where we can select a position on the floor and heat it up and then see what happens, how the fire develops from there. So we have different colors. Some colors are for burning, red means burning, orange is smoldering, and then we have the different gases in the air that could be visualized using different colors. That was the first iteration. In a later iteration, we refined it further. One of the things we noticed in the first iteration, that if you just visualize the gases with different colors and kind of just also on the floor different tile colors to represent what's going on, it's not super intuitive. So what we did in the second iteration, we immediately added a bit of fire and smoke effects, even if quite simple, just to see that to better understand what's going on in the simulation, basically. So we had some tools where we can take a cell and we can add heat to it, or we can add water to it. If you add water to it, it creates so it's very immersive. My colleague had to step away from the smoke. And then later through the process, so we were iterating on the health smoke system as well as on the fire rescue scenarios. Later by the third iteration of the scenario system, we integrated the health smoke simulation into the theme at the house. So as I mentioned, we had an instructor view where you could tell people what their mission is, what they need to do. There's a student view in VR. So in this, what you see here is the instructor view. You can fly around in the house and you can actually set things on fire. So basically you can, set the kitchen on fire, for example, or in this case, cause a fire by the entrance. And then we'll see our colleague in Belgium entering the house and extinguishing the fire. So this actually works pretty well. I mean, it's like technically we use Photon in combination with Unity for the multiplayer, so we could test across Connecticut as well as Belgium. So it actually also allows for basically international situations where you train with different people. This is another aspect, just one of the things that, I mean, if you develop games, like there's many hundreds of decisions that you have to make when in projects, and like here we were talking about the movement, because you can't just teleport super fast, because you can be kind of heavy with all the equipment. Movement isn't always so easy. So what we did initially is just show it with a progress bar to indicate how long it would take. In a later iteration, we experimented with actually showing yourself. It's kind of an out-of-body experience. It kind of shows how long it takes you to get to certain points. A cool feature was also if you actually crouch. It's VR, so you have to actually crouch if you want to see anything. If you're in a room full of smoke, and then if you teleport, you also see a character kind of crouching over the floor, moving like that. Another aspect when you're prototyping, there's often like a lot of balancing or variables that you want to try out, or you're not sure how something should work exactly. Let's say how fast the fire should spread to be realistic. So then you can have these tuning parameters where you can change the behavior in this case of the fire. So you can make it spread faster or slower and change all kinds of parameters. For example, we would check out actual videos of real fires, rooms that are on fire. How long does it take until the room is filled with smoke? How does the fire progress? And then you would aim to tune the simulation so it would actually reflect that as much as possible. So that has definitely been a very interesting experience and still a bit of a work in progress. And yeah, really exciting stuff. So yeah, this is just a screenshot from a different prototype. But it shows that there's like these different settings that you can change. So anytime in the simulation or application, you can just open it and then change all kinds of parameters. And in a lot of games, it's also like different features that you can enable or disable. For example, the Firefighter that you see, kind of the out-of-body experience. Maybe who knows? Maybe if you test it with people, they might think it's strange. They prefer the progress bar. So you could just put that in a Boolean variable and hook it up into the tuning system, and you can just turn that on and off, and you can see how people respond, what they prefer. Here is some footage of the current iteration. So Fred, feel free to comment. Oh, yeah. This is with some of the Fred's promo art skills applied. So here Fred was experimenting. I don't know if you want to share something about the tuning in this case.
Yeah, there's so many variables in the tuning system as it is, and working with our fire hazmat experts, trying to understand and also replicate, in a relatively short period of time, what nature has taken billions of years to create in the real world. It's been a bit of a challenge, but the nice thing about the tuning system, it's allowed us to go in and constantly tweak, and modify and save, the different iterations of the system. So that's a nice feature or group of features that we are going to incorporate into our software, where we'll be able to call up different simulations at different periods of time, allow our customers to kind of jump in at a fire that's been burning for 4 minutes in a different location and build out a library of experiences. This will allow us to really kind of extrapolate and build things out in a really fast pace. So it's been a lot of heavy lifting, and it's taken a long time and a lot of capital to get to this point, but we're right at that moment of critical point where we can start building out numerous scenarios and situations.
So yeah, outside of that, well, Fred also has some plans to expand outside of just firefighting. Like we have the whole system where you have the instructor view, different people can join in, you can see what they're doing in VR. You can assign them different tasks. Of course, it's not too hard to see that, yeah, this is something that could be used in different scenarios. So here's a very obvious one. Fred, maybe you can detail it a bit.
Yeah. So one of the other aspects of fire and smoke behavior is gases, the gases that exist in the real world. So we wanted to develop a system that would simulate those gases in the virtual world, which is proprietary, and we've got all the details on that. But so in this instance, an extension of the fire service is the hazmat, or the hazardous materials aspect of the fire service, and also in energy industries. So here we developed a generic 4-gas meter. We have a couple of basic scenarios right now. I won't get into the details of them, but to be able to pinpoint the point of origin of a natural gas leak, whether it be inside or outside of a structure, or it may be out in the middle of the street in a neighborhood or some sort of commercial industrial area. So there's been a lot of interest there, and so we're kind of zeroing in on this and some other aspects of our system right now. And then the goal here, I'm all about branding and trademarking and things of that nature. But so the idea here is to take a step back and say we're developing a platform, we're developing a system. We have the physics and chemistry based and the gas simulation component to our system. But then to be able to bundle this and offer up different titles, in the video game industry, or essentially a suite, to be able to provide a suite of experiences to certain industries, in this case, the fire service. So we are developing and have developed fire rescue, search and rescue missions, fire hazmat, locate the hazardous material, mitigate the situation, and then even basic communications amongst, that's where the incident command comes in. Communicating in and around the fire ground or a hazardous situation with other humans, and to do that in a fully immersive environment. It's all coming together, so we're super excited about it.
I see somebody has a question. I see a hand up
Sure.
in the air. Chad, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. So I work with firefighters. It's not a part of my normal job. I'm at a university that has a police department or fire department. And part of what my job right now is just kind of building interest in VR. Where there's very little VR presence where I'm at. And right now I'm trying to build it in different areas. Fire and rescue has been an interest of mine, and seeing what's out there. It's why I'm here for this panel.
Sure.
I guess my question at this point is, do you see a timeline or a date where you might have demos available to where people like myself can take out, not the full version of what you've created, but just a sample to show other interested parties, so that we could maybe build that interest?
Absolutely. It's a timeline right now. We are just about to go into our next round of development, and I'll let Bernard kind of confirm this with me. I'm thinking within the next 3 months, 2 to 3 months. And we do have something that's fairly robust now. I mean, I set the standards pretty high, right? So I'm always going to fall victim to scope creep. I want more and more and better and better and better. And God bless Bernard and his team for sticking with us this entire 2 years that we've been working on this. So I would say we do have something now that we could kind of show the 4-gas meter, focusing on methane or natural gas, multiple points of gas leak in and around the residential home. And we have now the health smoke system, which is integrating the fire and smoke behavior, where we can set any point of origin in and around that residential home, and to be able to call up those scenarios and put 2, 3, 4 people in via Oculus Quest headset, and then hosted by a VR capable laptop or desktop. We are doing that now. We are conducting demos now, and we do have proposals out to major universities and fire training academies and fire science programs.
So just in case, how can people reach out to you, Fred?
Oh, you can reach out to me if you go to Pleiadiansystems.com. That's PLEIADIAN systems.com. We're all over the place. We're online. We're on Facebook. You can certainly track us down that way. And
one follow-up question, if I could ask.
Sure.
Do you have planned in the future the ability to add custom geometry? So, for example, people at a university, they've got a small subset of specific buildings that they would be, developing plans to handle those situations.
Yes, that is the near-term, long-term plan, is to do that. And that's why we have the platform where we can kind of basically bolt on any 3D environment that would be developed. And we've moved from Unreal Engine Enterprise over to Unity. We're currently fairly exclusively focusing on Unity development. And I have conversations that are going on right now. We're looking at how can we port over assets between the two engines. But yes, that is definitely something that we would love to have that conversation further with you guys if that's something of interest.
It is for me.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll move to the next slide. At the end, we do have also a question and answer section, but I appreciate the question. So if anything comes up,
feel free.
You can definitely, feel free. Okay, so just a few slides about ongoing testing and evaluation. So this is mainly on Fred's side, testing with actual firefighters, going to different firefighting departments. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to add.
I would just say, the feedback has been amazing. I've learned a lot from the fire industry. They're fairly cut and dry. They do not pull any punches. If they think it sucks, they tell you, right? And that's the kind of feedback that we want. And they're actually super excited about this. I know there are some other companies that are out there and they're currently actively doing things, and they're maybe a few years further down the road than we are. But we're our approach. It's taking us a while, and with the resources we have available. But they're very anxious to jump in and to interact with what we're developing, and they want more and more experiences. They want more scenarios, more tools, more features built into the system. We're all consumers at heart, so that's a very challenging appetite to satiate. Quite honestly, we're all consumers, and we want like Veruca Salt. We want it all, and we want it now. We're conditioned to be that way, but we're trying to do the right thing and build this out correctly. It's taking us a while. Physics and chemistry based fire and smoke behavior and gases in virtual reality, and to build curricula that meets or exceeds OSHA and NFPA standards. These are not easy things to do. So slowly but surely, we're getting there.
So yeah, we reached our final slide, the questions and answers. So yeah, very happy to answer any questions that you guys have here in the audience or online. Oh yeah, I think, yeah, I'll repeat the question. Go ahead. Yeah. 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 So I'll repeat the question for the audience, so because I can't hear you. So part of the question is like, based on being a company focused on rapid prototyping, how do you restrict the scope, given all of the inspiration and all the different ideas that can come up, and like, yeah, it's like you have to find your way in that. Yeah. Does that summarize the question correctly? Yeah. Yeah. So basically, yeah, I would say that, I mean, it's a difficult question. I mean, or it is a very important aspect of prototyping. So I would say, first of all, you can just embrace it, like all the ideas, and try to dream up the solution. Like, how do you see it, and really think about it. Like, so of course, thinking about something is much faster than developing it. So it is definitely a good exercise to do. Really envision it and test it a bit, even without prototyping. As in, you can just talk to people about it, or you can think about, okay, what are the unique selling points? That's the question I ask a lot of people often. Like, if you were to explain this in 10 minutes to somebody, like, what would you focus on, or let's say you pitch it to an investor, and let's assume you're raising funds, like, what would you want them to remember? So that's the way to kind of discover those unique selling points. So, so first of all, it's important that the solution that you're building, I think, in general, it's kind of streamlined and has a clear purpose. So even what you're envisioning, so not just, that's not the answer for prototyping specifically, but it is really important to think about that. Like, what is your target audience? So there's definitely a few questions you can ask yourself to kind of first better understand the vision of how you envision this product to be on the market. So that's the first step. And then the second step is, what is the most simple version you can test in order to verify key assumptions? So you need to know, what are the things I'm assuming? What are key assumptions? So one of the things that's very important is, I mean, and for some people, there's sometimes a big elephant in the room when you're doing a project where there's a single point of failure or something that sometimes people have a tendency to avoid and kind of work around and kind of deal with that problem later. And then it kind of, that's very problematic when you do that. So if you feel that there's something where you, like, what is your biggest fear? That's maybe a good question. Like, what could go wrong? And then zoom in on that, focus on that. And so if, let's say, the fear is that the solution is not going to be possible on the modern mobile VR headsets, for example, then you have to focus on that. And then then you have to think, what else do I need in order to test that? Maybe you need a little bit of everything, but in very small level of detail, and then test the main feature. Let's say very simple house you can move around, and then just immediately put it the fire in, for example. I mean, and just to tie it back to the example. So that's really important. Like, what are the core features? Don't add any features initially that build upon assumptions that you haven't tested yet. That's also a good one. So that's kind of the definition of a core feature. Also, if a feature depends on other features to work that are not trivial, like not just like, oh, my computer needs to work, but on actually other features I would implement, then that's probably not a core feature and might be a candidate for removal from to keep it for future consideration. Also, if there's things that are a sure improvement, you don't necessarily need to prototype it, especially if you're in the early stages of prototyping. If you know, if I'm going to put this in, this is going to make it better, and you're certain of that, you don't need to see it in a prototype to be certain of that. You're already certain, so don't waste any time on it. Just focus on the things that might fail, that you need to really verify a certain assumption. Yeah. You're very welcome. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the question, I'm just going to repeat for the online audience, is that whether there's kind of a conflict between the muscle memory from a real firefighter versus things you have to do in VR, because it's not necessarily the same. And if there's maybe kind of even a negative training effect where there might maybe unlearn certain skills that, because you don't have to, like, maybe you're not really heavily packed in the virtual simulation versus the real world. Like, does that, yeah. I think that's a question for Fred.
Yeah, and that's it's a great question, and it's something that from the very moment we set out on this is that I was always very clear in my conversations with firefighters that this is not to replace physical firefighter training. You know, learning how to operate a nozzle or a hose, learning how to, extricate, to pull out a victim, or, to breach a doorway, that type of thing. Firefighters need to practice that every day, right? And on the job, off the job. And so that's not what this is about. What we're setting out to do is to immerse firefighters in situations where they can focus on tactical decision making, hone in on their situational awareness abilities, to be able to make critical decisions under high stress conditions, not physical high stress conditions, but mental, right, and emotional. Right now, our software at this point, the environments at this point, we're building for the least common denominator, making sure that it runs performantly on a unit similar to the Oculus Quest 2. So, a hyper realistic or photorealistic environment at this stage, in the hardware world is not feasible. But the plan is to, within the next 3, 4, 5 years, to get to a level where you've got a hyper photorealistic environment where your senses will be commandeered, so to speak, and not so much on the physical side. Maybe eventually we do have some plans for that integration of a hybrid version of this augmented reality solution. So it is not to replace physical firefighter training. It's really about the mental and emotional. Making critical decisions under high stress, and practice basically protocol, simple things.
Yeah, so it's not maybe a 100% substitute for real world training, but yeah, of course, in real world training situations, I'm not a firefighter, so I learned a lot of things during this. project, including how they will have these concrete structures that they will furnish and then light on fire.
Right.
And then they have to practice, and then you can practice with only a few persons at a time.
Right.
So there's definitely a lot of ability for this kind of decision making, and you still have to, if the smoke in VR is yeah at the height of your head and you can't see anything, you're forced to kind of go down on the floor.
That's right.
So there's definitely some resemblances, and I would assume technically you could wear the actual equipment as well to kind of get more of that feeling. But yeah, you're definitely not going to feel exhausted going upstairs in VR. If you look at the out of body experience with the other, your avatar walking up the stairs.
You know,
so
even
definitely some.
Yeah, even we're using the gas metering as an example, right? To pick up a physical 4 gas meter is not a big deal. This is not a complex task, but recreating in situations in virtual environments and to be able to take that gas meter up to and in throughout a potentially hazardous space where there may be high, carbon dioxide or H2S or natural gas, where you've got, let's say, for instance, in regard to incident command training or fire hazmat training, where you're going into a potentially explosive environment with a device, and should you decide to communicate your readings back via your radio, your handheld, there's a little spark in there that could ignite that entire structure and level an entire neighborhood. So those are the types of things that are difficult to reproduce in the real world. In the physical world, it's expensive, logistically challenging to put to put humans into those types of scenarios, whereas we're getting there fairly performantly now. And to be able to change up not the laws, but change up the situation so you still have to leverage your knowledge and experience to get through and make critical decisions.
Did that adequately answer the question, or any follow-up? Yeah.
And I'm also trying to bring your thinking because like the application that you guys have, benefits to do that. Because it's an important consideration at the time. It's a great way to do it. It doesn't say some of the other things, but add to it. One of the considerations that we have is because it was mobile. You guys look at is that you look at mobile VR places that in the process platform, then you have the consumer side, which has certain things on their store. But then there's a business enterprise that has different applications on their store. And so that you have to get APK to load, so you can get to store correctly. How is that process when you bring the product to the mobile device? Is there a make one like
yeah. So the question is about the distribution as a mobile, if it's mobile software, how that gets distributed, for example, as an APK file, and the different stores that are present, as well as some more open platforms such as the Pico Neo 3, which is kind of like the Oculus Quest 2, but with a more open platform. So I think that's still we're still a bit away from the actual distribution, other than specific test cases for certain clients. So I believe there's Fred would directly work with the university in question, or the training center in question, to make sure they have access to the software. But a precise plan for how exactly it's going to be distributed is currently not yet decided. But I agree. Some certain devices are definitely easier to do that, such as the Pico Neo. Also on the Quest, there are options. You can use SideQuest, for example, to install. But we would definitely want to make sure that we don't require any high-level technical skills to really get it to work. So there would need to be a user-friendly way. So maybe that will be an area for some experimentation to see what's the best, and actually testing with our users.
Bernard, that brings up a good point. This is something that I think we've clearly gotten to this level where we're designing a solution so it's so simple and easy to use that a child could use it. You know, obviously the principles and procedures and the protocols that are covered with the subject matter, as it relates to fire and hazmat and all that, you know, you'd have to be well versed in that. But it's an easy setup. You know, it's you launch it, you put the headset on, you sign on with a code, and you're up and running literally in less than 5 minutes. And I have to say, hats off to PreviewLabs. You know, they really delivered a solution that is so intuitive and so easy to use. Even someone like myself can use it. And that's kind of, I use myself as the litmus test. I am somewhat technically savvy, but I just play dumb. And if I struggle, I let Bernard and the team know, and they'll make adjustments. So
it's definitely a challenge sometimes. Fred has the guy with the 1,000 ideas. It ties into one of the previous questions, like how do you manage that? So I guess
right.
with our prototyping experience, we know how to handle Fred. But yeah, that's it's important. Like I always like to keep things really simple, or as simple as possible. Like sometimes in a way that you think, yeah, is this really gonna work? Is this not too simple? And then sometimes you get away with it, and that's really awesome because then you have a solution that's much more elegant. So always try to oversimplify and then see if it works. And if you can always add more, but don't make it too complicated before you build. Build something simple, see if it works. Try to come up with the most simple solution that can meet your goal. So yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? You're in the room.
Yeah, Fred. So you just gave a description of how the use would be, where they start up the software, put on the headset, enter code. The enter a code is struck a bell with me. Are you planning on this being a subscription service or a module that people can purchase from you and then use?
Both. Yeah. In the near term, it'll be direct, you know, but there will be a subscription component to it. The other thing is that we're looking at it, you know, with my background and the folks that I have contact with, you know, from a marketing perspective, right? One of the key goals for me when I set out on this endeavor is to get the system in the hands of every firefighter in the country. You know, looking at quantity over, you know, quality, right? You know, high paying, you know, $50,000, $75,000 clients. That's great. And they're out there. But the goal is to build this so that a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter who wants to allocate $250 to participate in a tiered program with us, that'll be subscription based.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, any other questions? We're very happy to answer even more questions. I think the audience in the room is satisfied.
Yeah, you know, the other thing too, and I'll just throw this out there, if you know, we do know that there are plenty of people vying for this space. You know, it's the industry, the market is wide open, right? In VR and AR across the globe. So our focus is focusing and doing the best work that we can, zeroing in, but at the same time being able to take a step back every so often and say, hey, you know what, this is a great platform, this is a great system. You know, if the Culinary Institute of America wants to utilize our system to train their students how to make a Cobb salad in a kitchen environment, so be it. We would look at that as a potential customer. But right now, we're really kind of zeroing in on any high risk industry, energy, natural gas, other hazardous materials.
Yeah, one of the things that's also exciting, and actually in a conversation at the bar yesterday, at the networking event after the conference, I was talking with somebody, I forget the name or the company, but we were talking about how if there's an incident, let's say a fire, there's local well, certain people that kind of report the fire, or maybe it could be the police, and then they're in command, and then junior firefighters arrive, and there could be a senior firefighter arriving later, and every time the control of the who's in charge actually changes, and it's also something that's potentially dangerous. So where the mistakes can happen if there's a change of command in an ongoing disaster situation. I mean, it happens as the fire expands or disasters escalate. There have to be these changes, and that was really interesting, and I definitely see a lot of potential there as well. Like if you have this disaster management where things really change that dynamically, or things escalate, or different people arrive to the scene. What do they need to do, and where do they find everything, and how do you make sure there's not going to be any misunderstanding? So there's definitely a lot of potential there within direct reach.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is kind of interesting, and we would probably use this very judiciously, is, you know, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Like, you know, you're a training officer, your training instructor, or maybe it's something that is handled by our company, where you can put humans through these simulations. They're repeatable, right? You're going to have a library of situations or scenarios. You're going to be able to call those up, and then you have your free roam and free will to go ahead and execute your tasks and set out to achieve your objectives, your team objectives. But there's always going to be the option for us to be able to throw a switch, to pull that lever and introduce some unknown variable into a simulation in real time. That's where it's really going to challenge. Now, obviously, we're going to we'll definitely be putting a limiter on that, right? To prevent training officers or facilitators to just start throwing everything at humans and creating unnecessarily high stress or traumatic experiences. But that's the beauty of software, is that we could throw a wrench into the middle of a rescue, and maybe there's a palette of 3 or 5 different types of potential hazards that could come about during a rescue mission like that. That's the beauty of software, is that we'll be able to flip the switch, push the button, pull the lever, and then see how your students react in real time.
Let's see, one more question, or even more. Yeah, go ahead.
Like it's very cool that you have anything happening in the lab. We have usually first responsibility, and we have our own officers from occupation health department. And then there's some safety officers in the building. And when it comes to substance and the amount, it could be certain person in charge. It could be that none of us you can't go in there and call the local fire department. But we've had a couple of times now where the officers they didn't know, or they're not saying, they just want to take over the team, and that's what I don't know. Back up, and it's very confusing. Because you have one important they don't always work simulate together.
So at your university, these are chemistry labs where these situations occur. Yeah. So I'll repeat for the audience. So there's different hazards that can occur at the labs in the university, such as biological, radiation, chemical. I would assume, where there's indeed different internal departments or different people internally that are responsible in case these things happen, and then it could be that it escalates towards the local fire department where sometimes it's not even clear who's in charge, that there's maybe nobody in charge or nobody is able to get in because of being a dangerous situation, or you have to wait for somebody to arrive before anything can be done at all. Yeah.
One of the other aspects of our system that we're focusing on is multi-agency training. So you could, because I know here in Connecticut, once a year, twice a year, maybe if logistics and budget allows, you will have either multiple agencies within a town or a county do routine multi-agency training. I hate to mention it, but let's use it as an example. Active shooter active shooter training in a hospital, let's say, right? To get fire, police, paramedics, maybe even government, officials to be able to do more routine training for those types of situations. That is something that is on our radar for our system, to be able to scale it up to the point where you can have a headset in each department around a town or within a county or a state or around the country. That's kind of where we're headed. That's the long-term plan.
So the instructor view that we showed, that, and that's kind of part of the roadmap for the future vision, is that there could be a team of firefighters where there is an instructor, somebody commanding the firefighters and somebody commanding the police, and so there could be almost a hierarchy of these instructor views, where there could be a chief discussing with the other instructors, and then the other instructors working directly with the people in the field in VR, so to speak. And it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's like with game technology, you can imagine that the Fortnite, there's 100 players on the map. So this is pretty easy to do. I mean, from a technical point of view, of course, it takes time to develop and everything, but it's not rocket science. We've seen it in video games. It's pretty normal to have a lot of people collaborate in a way, and it's just a matter of having, the different. Of course, I guess there's not a lot of games where they make it so complicated as in disaster management, but that's that's really exciting, I think.
Yeah. One of the other things I want to mention, Bernard, is that anybody on the call or in the room, if there's any interest in reaching out to us, we'd be more than happy to continue the conversation. And also, if there's anyone who might be interested in partnering with us and introducing us to universities, colleges, fire training academies, or maybe you or your organization is in a different industry that maybe we haven't even considered or hasn't approached us to date. This has been 6 years and close to $500,000 to get to this point. So rather than recreate the wheel, we're in a situation where we can partner with other organizations and help them further their ideas.
Yeah. So just to make sure, so that's Pleiadiansystems.com.
Yep.
Yeah. And if they go there, there's a contact form.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds good. That's it. So I think here in the audience, like if there's any questions, we can talk.
I could actually put my signature in the chat if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. So otherwise, I think we filled the time slot almost entirely. So I think there's a board games event and then an event at the brewery locally. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to that as well. Getting this is my big event of the day, of course. Well, it was really a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, also online, for your interest in
thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity. All set?
Oh yeah. I didn't know. Oh yeah, that's the other computer is still on. Okay, well we'll talk later, Fred.
Sounds great. Awesome job. Take care now. Thanks, Bernard.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.